Good morning. Ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, dear students, I welcome you all in the Golden Hall of the Croatian Institute of History at the beginning of second seminary, second colloquium organized within our project financed by Croatian Scientific Foundation, and project is entitled European Origins of Modern Croatia. This is second colloquium in the series about intellectual transfers of ideas in the realm of Habsburg monarchy, and today's speakers are coming on the first colloquium from two distinguished institutions, Austrian and Hungarian Academy of Sciences. Their names and their biographies will be our colleague Zriko Novosel will tell you more about them. So colleague Cieger from the Hungarian Academy and colleague Adlgasser from Austrian Academy. I wish you all pleasant stay in the Institute, and I hope you will learn a lot about intellectual transfers of the realm of Habsburg monarchy in the period of proto-modernization of Croatia. Thank you.
Dear colleagues and dear students, I would like to thank our director, Dr. Ravancic, for his welcoming words, and I would like to thank all of you to come today. It's a great pleasure to welcome you here in the Croatian Institute of History. I would like to thank you all for coming to the second of 7 planned scientific colloquia entitled Models and Experiences of Intellectual Transfer in the Period of Proto-Modernization. The first colloquium was held on the 8th of April 2019 with participation of two researchers, Veronika Esik from Institute of History of the Hungarian Academy of Sciences in Budapest, and Dieter Hecht from Institute of Cultural Sciences and Theatre History of the Austrian Academy of Sciences in Vienna. Both colloquia were organized by the project European Origins of Modern Croatia, transfer of ideas in political and cultural fields in the 18th and 19th centuries. This project is a part of scientific and research work in the Croatian Institute of History in Zagreb and is implemented in cooperation with scientists from the Faculty of Law and the Faculty of Social Sciences and Humanities of the University of Zagreb, as well as the Croatian School Museum. It's financed by the Croatian Science Foundation, covering the period from October 2018 to September 2022. And now I will tell a few words about research group. Researchers are Štefka Batinić from Croatian School Museum, Ivana Horbec from Croatian Institute of History, Mirela Krešić, Associate Professor from Faculty of Law of the University of Zagreb, Branko Ostajmer from Croatian Institute of History, Marina Protorka-Štimec, Associate Professor from Faculty of Social Sciences and Humanities of the University of Zagreb, Teodora Šek-Brnardić, Marijan Šabić from Croatian Institute of History, Jasna Turkalj from Croatian Institute of History, and our PhD candidate, Zriko Novosel. Now, a few words about the project. Proceeding from a hypothesis that the foundations of Croatia as a modern state were laid in the 18th and the long 19th centuries, the objective of the project is to research the transfer and reception of various ideas and ideological currents of European provenance in Croatia's political and cultural life, which contributed to the formation of Croatia's European identity and its transformation into a modern state. Research will focus on the influence of European ideas on the development of a parliamentary system and parliamentary culture in Croatia, as well as online foundations for modern public administration, the healthcare system, and the education system. The object of the analysis will also be the transfer of ideas in literature, transformation of the legal status of women, as well as reflections of the Enlightenment. Major objectives of the project are to determine models, circumstances, and reasons for the transfer of and reception of ideas of European provenance in Croatia's political and cultural life during the 18th and the 19th centuries, to explore strategies of their modification and adaptation to local circumstances, to understand reasons for and circumstances of resistance to these influences, and finally, to contribute to understanding of formation of Croatia's European identity in the broader political and cultural context. These objectives we will achieve through interdisciplinary approach in research, applying modern methodological patterns, as well as through critical analysis of archival sources and relevant literature, cooperation with scientists of related disciplines in Croatia and abroad, and by disseminating results through publications, conferences, and digital media. Expected results of the project are in digital repository, which is accessible to the public through an open access to the project's website. The repository will comprise excerpts from various types of documents, legal and administrative documents, imperial letters, political treaties, literary and journalist works, correspondence, memoirs, diaries, etc., that document the transfer of ideas and enable the reader and researcher to understand the different models and strategies of acceptance and modification of individual ideas and/or resistance to these ideas. It will be possible to search the content of the repository by full text search, by author, and by keywords. Scientific papers in international and domestic journals, proceedings, collected papers, and an e-book on parliamentary procedures of the Croatian Diet, which will be accessible on the project's website by the end of the third year of project implementation. As further result can be said, participation of project team members at scientific conferences in Croatia and abroad. Until now, the project team members have participated on 5 conferences abroad and at 6 international conferences in Croatia and held 14 lectures. And till the end of the first year of project implementation, we will participate at 3 international conferences, 2 of them abroad. A series of scientific exchanges of views entitled Models and Experiences on Intellectual Transfer in the Period of Proto-Modernization, where distinguished foreign experts will discuss the research on the following topics: civil and political rights, minority status. This was the topic of the first colloquium. Parliamentary life and political culture, which will be discussed today. Then public healthcare system, development of modern education, science and school system, legal status of women in a comparative context, reflections of the Enlightenment, and the 7th colloquium on the topic of cultural transfers in literature. We will plan to make final proceedings of work of all project team members, which will be in form of an e-book available at the project's website by the end of the project implementation, and the PhD thesis by our PhD candidate Vinko Novosel. I would like to thank our colleagues Franz Adlgasser and András Cieger for accepting our invitation to participate in this scientific colloquium. I would also like to thank colleague Vinko Novosel for helping in organizing this event. And finally, thank you all for coming. I hope you'll find these lectures interesting and useful. And now I will ask colleague Vinko Novosel to introduce our lecturers. Thank you.
Thanks to our project manager, Laszlo Schwager, for presenting our project goals and research activities. Now, without much further ado, I would like to introduce our first presenter today, Dr. Franz Adlgasser. Since 2013, Dr. Adlgasser is a senior research associate at the Austrian Academy of Sciences, Institute for Modern and Contemporary Historical Research, where he led the research group History of the Habsburg Monarchy from 2013 to 2017. He obtained his PhD degree at the University of Salzburg with the title of his doctoral dissertation being American Individualism Abroad, Herbert Hoover, the American Relief Administration und Österreich, 1919 to 1923. From 1991 to 2010, he was a secretary of the Commission for Modern Austrian History, and since 2016, a member of the board. From 2000 to 2010, he co-edited an online platform, Habsburg, Hane Discussion Network for the Culture and History of the Habsburg Monarchy and its successor states, 1500 to present. Since 2010, he is a member of the editorial board there. Since 2016, he is the editor of the book series Studien zur Geschichte der Österreichisch-Ungarischen Monarchie and co-editor of the series Die Protokolle des Lateinischen Ministerates 1867 bis 1918. His other most recent publications in English would include The Habsburg Civil Service and Beyond, Bureaucracy and Civil Servants from the Vormärz to the Interwar Years, published in Vienna in 2019. This is a book that he co-edited with Frederick Lindström. Further, his chapter of a book, Arendshow and Italy, Aspects of a Difficult Relationship, published in Österreichisch-Ungarn und Italien im Ersten Weltkrieg, co-edited by Andreas Gozman, Romano Ugolini, and Stefan Vedrac, also in Vienna in 2019. His scholarly research interests lie in the history of the Austrian parliament, politics, parliamentarism, history of the elites, bureaucracy and administration in the 19th and early 20th century, Habsburg monarchy and Central Europe. Now I would like to give word to Professor.
Try to manage. Thank you for this kind introduction. Thank you for inviting me here. I've never been to Zagreb before. In my other life as a historian, I'm working on Count Ehrenthal, the Austrian-Hungarian foreign minister just before the First World War. And from that, some of the buildings and the names around here are always familiar for me. The Sabor, the Rauch Palace around here, so it's good for me to see these things and directly that I always just read about. But now, what I want to do is, for the next half hour, to give you some idea about the main project that I'm working on now since 2002, that is some time, I would say. That is the Austrian Parliament, a collective biography. I will give you first a short history about the project, then present the results so far, and then give you some preliminary results of the research towards a collective biography of the Austrian parliaments from 1848 until 1918. So let me start at the beginning of this thing. In 2002, the Austrian Academy of Sciences started a 3-year project called Parliamentarians in Austria 1848 to 1918, funded by the Austrian Science Fund. Behind this project at the time was the then recently published volume on constitution and parliamentarianism in the handbook series Die Habsburger Monarchie 1848 bis 1918. The ultimate goal of the project was from the beginning a collective biography of the members of the Austrian Central Parliaments from 1848 to 1918. That is, the Constitutional Assembly of 1848-49 and the two houses of the Viennese Reichsrat from 1861 to 1918. The first main task was the creation of a database by establishing formalized career patterns of the about 3,500 members of parliament in this time. The individual entries in the database include basic biographical information, that is name, date and place of birth and death, family background, religious and ethnic national affiliation, information regarding the parliamentary career, and a standardized curriculum vitae, including information about education, about professional, political, and other activities, plus an open field for additional information and, of course, a field on sources and literature. After 3 years, that was the original project running from 2002 to 2005. In the final report, one could read that collecting the data for the parliamentary careers was at that time almost finished, while the collection of the basic biographic information for the members is far advanced. As a work in progress, the collection of information will be continued throughout the duration further on. Basically, the database offered at that time, for the first time, exact data to investigate a collective biography of the Austrian Central Parliaments. But at that time, neither the work of the individual biographies, with the ultimate goal of a biographical dictionary, nor the research on the collective biography have come to a final conclusion. That was at the end of 2004. And then the question remaining was, in 2004, 2005, so what to do now? Let the project stand there and bury the results in the graveyard of the unknown research projects near the battlefield over third-party financing, or continue somehow, somewhat to bring it to a conclusion. The decision was made that the project should be continued within the financial, personal, organizational framework of the Commission for the History of the Habsburg Monarchy, as it was called then, of the Austrian Academy of Sciences. And this is why I am here. I'm still working on this project, and I'm still employed by the Academy. The fixed point in the project is me. Anything else changed over the years, as did my employment status, from third-party finance over freelancer to part-time employee to full-time researcher under a temporary contract, and since 2013 with a permanent contract. This is the usual career of historians these days, as you all know. What also changed was the institutional framework within the Academy. The Commission was integrated in the Institute for Modern and Contemporary Historical Research, as we are called, but it might be that by tomorrow or in a week we will have a new name. The Academy is about to change our name. We don't know which. We have some ideas, but it's above our heads, and that's one of the things that you might be familiar as well. We do the work, but the decisions are made further above. What remained the same was also the original research goal, that is, creating a collective biography of the Austrian Central Parliaments. A central focus still is the question of continuity and change, based on the theory of an increasing professionalization of politics during the late 19th and early 20th centuries, and the connected replacement of dignitaries, Honoratiorenpolitiker in German, through professional politicians. Major points of interest, among others, are still the changes in the entry age of parliamentarians, the level of renewal, that is the ratio of newcomers in the House, the social and regional background of the members in Parliament, and their educational and occupational structure. As a result of this research, we can conclude that the reforms in the election laws led to a clear decrease in influence of the dignitaries, while the elements of mass democracy took over the leading role. Austria developed, at least regarding to her parliament, into a modern state. And if I'm talking about Austria here, I'm meaning this still vague political entity that was created after the compromise with Hungary in 1867, that only was called officially Austria in 1917. And between it was called those lands which are represented in the Reichsrat, in the parliament, and usually is called Cisleithania as opposed to Transleithania, named after the border river between Austria and Hungary, just east of Vienna, the Leitha, which is today not a border river between Austria and Hungary anymore, since some of the areas of the now Austrian province of Burgenland, with a Croatian minority, as you will know, was after the settlements after World War I turned over from Hungary to Austria. So now Leitha is not the Leitha is not the border river between Austria and Hungary, but between Lower Austria and Burgenland. Let me turn back to the beginning. The first, and this turned out not so easy decision, was who will be included into the database and who will be in the dictionary. That is, what are the criteria to call someone a member of parliament. There I took a double route. I included all persons elected to parliament or appointed to the upper house in the database, without regard to their actual appearance in the house. Finally, it turned out that these were about 3,600 entries. For the inclusion in the dictionary, the decision was made a little differently. Included there are all persons who actually entered the parliament. For the elected members, it meant that they took the oath in the house. For the members in the upper house, it meant that they did not actively refuse the appointment. This reduced the total number of entries for the dictionary to about 3,450 names. The creation of the basic entity was not an easy and definitely a time-consuming task. It meant not only going through the stenographic protocols of the parliaments, but also through those of the 17 regional diets of Austria. That is Cisleithania after the compromise of 1867, as I've said. Since from 1861 until 1873, the members of parliament were elected indirectly through the diets, and only since 1873 directly through the voters. And in this time, between 1861, basically until 1865, Croatia proper, that is the kingdom of Croatia and Slavonia, should have come into view as well, because in that time the Austrian parliament, the Viennese parliament, the Reichsrat, in its theory was really a parliament, or should have been a parliament of the whole Habsburg monarchy, including the lands of the Crown of St. Stephen, that is Hungary, Transylvania, and Croatia, Slavonia at that time, and the Italian lands of Venetia. But the diets of Hungary, Croatia, and Venetia refused to send their representatives to Vienna. Only for a short time, for a couple of years, the Transylvanian diet sent them to Vienna. So basically it remained the parliament of what after 1867 was Cisleithania. Creating the database also included, of course, checking all appointments to the upper house of the Austrian Parliament since 1861, the House of Lords, and of going through the voting reports for all 383 election districts for the Reichstag of 1848-49, which is also part of the project. It's not only the parliament since 1861, but also the revolutionary parliament of 1848-49, but only the Austrian, not the Hungarian. As it turned out, all existing lists, be it contemporary or modern, were unreliable and incomplete. The basic set of names had to be created first. Coming to names, this was not so easy either. Which forms should be included in the database and which forms should be used for the dictionary? Here I used a rather pragmatic than a strict scientific approach. I used the family names in a somewhat standardized form. For German, Italian, and Romanian names, the version in the protocols. For Slavic names, the contemporary form in its native version, not in the German version of the protocols. That is, including all diacritical signs. From the beginning, I abstained from including the Cyrillic version of the Ukrainian and few Serbian members of parliament into the database and the dictionary. Instead, I used the historic transcription, that is without the diacritics, and enclosed in brackets the modern scientific transcription. Name changes, noble titles were of course included, also academic titles as well. A similar way was used for the first and other given names. Concentration on the first names, standardized German versions for Germans, Slavic versions with varieties. A tricky thing, again, was the handling of place names. In the list of the election districts, I stayed with the historic versions as they were published in the German version of the districts in the Reichsgesetzblatt, including the changes over times. So there, it always reads Prague, not Praha, and it always reads the Italian version of the Istrian and Dalmatian towns. So it means Zara and not Zadar, and it reads Ragusa and not Dubrovnik. For the place names in the biographic data, I used the official place repertory, the Ortsrepertorium, published by the Austrian Census Bureau after the census of 1910 as the reference. All place names which appeared there in a bilingual form are also bilingual in the dictionary. So it reads there Zara and in brackets Zadar, Borovino and in brackets Rovin. To make the dictionary more user-friendly, in a couple of instances, another simpler solution is used. For place names, which even today can be considered to be generally known in its German version, only this version is given, like Prague, Krakow, Lemberg, Laibach. For the place names in historic Galicia, only the official Polish version is given, since it would be almost unmanageable for a dictionary to include all versions that appeared contemporarily later on, these kinds of things. So, at the end, an entry looks like that. This is a pretty complete entry by a well-known German Bohemian politician, Karl Maria Bernreiter. You see right next to his name his academic title, place and date and place of birth and death, religious affiliation, the name of his father and his profession, his family status, single in this case, educational career, professional career, then his times in parliament. AH means House of Representatives, Abgeordnetenhaus, the times he spent there, the districts he represented, the political affiliation, that is the club affiliation in the House. Then, since he was appointed to the House of Lords, the date of his appointment, he was a member for life, was a member of the Verfassungspartei, of the Constitutional Party, and his function there. Then his published diaries and the literature on him in a short version, which a full list at the end of the 2-volume dictionary. And that was a dictionary that was published in 2014 in 2 volumes. An entry could also look like that. This is a member of parliament in the Reichstag 1848-49, from a Polish member from Galicia, today's Poland. All that's known about him is that he was a Roman Catholic, that he was a farmer in a town, and not much else. These are the two, the level that entries in the dictionary vary. Now, the publication of this dictionary was made possible through a financial grant by the Austrian Parliament, today's Austrian Parliament. The Austrian Parliament, which will publish basically the dictionary on its homepage. They told me that they are in the final stages of preparing the data, which also was a long time project due to other things that they were involved with. If you have been to Vienna lately, you know that the building of the Austrian Parliament is under total construction, that the Parliament moved out of the building into the Hofburg in Vienna, and the library and the archive as well had to move, and they had different things to do than taking care of my other dictionary. The database and the dictionary are still a work in progress. I'm still adding on, I'm still making corrections, and until now, since the publication of the printed version of the dictionary, I made corrections and additions to more than 105,000 of all entries there. That is, about half of the entries have been updated since the publication of the dictionary. And these updates will be shown in the version that will be published by the Parliament. Let's say a few words about sources. Of course, published dictionaries, both contemporary and modern, memory literature, monographies, essays on persons, the usual literature, but also very important research in census data and in personal records. Birth, marriage, death records are an invaluable source. And these sources have become increasingly available online, therefore making the research on the basic biographical data not only easier, but the information provided much more reliable. This is also the case with newspapers and other periodical publications. Not only are more and more of these sources available online, the tools to search them by names and contents become better almost by the day. This enriches the project and guarantees a factual seriosity, which was unthinkable when I started the project in 2002. And of course, there are the archival sources, mostly in Vienna for me. Voting records, and especially personnel files for public employees or army officers, which contain otherwise not available information on the background and the career. There is where I stand with the database and the dictionary. But from the beginning, the ultimate goal was a collective biography for the Austrian parliaments over time. The goal is that this work will be finished in the next 2 years. The research questions have not changed on its basic outlook since the beginning of the project. Still in the center of the focus is the parliament of the whole, not in its national or ethnic fragmentation. I'm not looking primarily for the profile of the German, Czech, Italian, Croatian, Polish members, but for the members of parliament across these ethnic divides. Are there certain recruitment patterns which changed over time or not? Were these patterns, if they exist, different between rural and urban areas? Did the changes in the election laws affect the composition of the parliament? Or can other factors be identified which were more important, like socio-economic developments, center-periphery relations? Therefore, I analyzed the makeup of the parliament along certain criteria. Now, to show you some things that might be not as boring as what I've said so far, I show you some of the results in tables, but this is only a sketch and still far from really satisfying conclusions. Let's first take a look at the age of the delegates at the time of the election. Here I am concentrating on the elected houses. And the numbers look like that. This is for 1848-49. There you can see that the average age of the delegates was 42.5 years. 42, the median age, by a passive voting age of 24. For the elections from 1861 until 1911, the numbers look like that. As you can see, the average age is about 5 years higher than for the 1848 elections, and did not really change over time. It increased a little bit in those years where there was a general stability in the House. That is when the percentage of newcomers was rather low in the years 1879, 58, 91, and then decreased again in 1907 and 1911. This 5-year difference between 1848 and the later years seems pretty big, but if you take into account the passive voting age, it's basically the same. Passive voting age in 1848 was 24, and the members of parliament were on average 18 years older. Passive voting age since 1861 was 30 years, and again, the parliamentarians are on average 18 years older than the minimum age requirement. If we look at some of the years, compare 2 years with a rather high average age and a rather low one. We see in 1885 it was rather high, in 1907 rather low. The explanation for 1907 is that just before these elections, the election laws were changed radically. General and equal male suffrage was introduced in 1907, but before then the franchise was very much restricted. So we have a whole number of newcomers coming into the parliament, and they, of course, tend to be younger than those who were already in the parliament. So this is the average age of new parliamentarians throughout the elections. And there you can see that it did change a little bit, that in those years when major election law changes took effect, that was in 1897 and especially in 1907, definitely younger parliamentarians came into the parliament, but the change is not that great. It's about 3 years on average. Corresponding to the numbers, to the age numbers, we have the parliamentary experience of delegates. That is, their former years in parliament at the time of election. And there you can see that we have a huge increase of newcomers, of course, in those elections when not only the franchise changed, but also the number of districts and of seats in the parliament increased dramatically. That was in 1873, in 1897, and in 1907. But at the same time, we see that quite a number of parliamentarians stay in the House rather long. In 1885, we have 86 parliamentarians who were in the parliament between 6 and 12 years, that is 1 and 2 legislative periods, and 44 who have been there for 12 to 18 years, that is 3 to 4 election periods. We see that the numbers decrease later on, but not dramatically. To compare that to numbers which show how long parliamentarians stayed in the parliament. Here we can see that we have quite some numbers of parliamentarians who remained very long in the parliament. And these numbers changed over time as well. They increased in the years after 1873, and they decreased a little bit later on. To get away from the parliament itself and come to a thing that is, where did parliamentarians come from? Here is a table on the size of the communities the parliamentarians lived in. And there you can see that always between 20 and 30% of all parliamentarians, of all deputies, came from rural communities, small rural communities. While at the same time, always between 35 and 25% and little over 20% came from provincial capitals. And always between 13 and 16, 17%, 11% came from Vienna, lived in Vienna. That is, much more politicians lived in provincial capitals and in Vienna than these cities sent representatives to the parliament. This is one factor that shows center-periphery relationships. This trend would, this over-representation of the centers of Austria would become even a little more clearer if I would have shown a table on where did representatives live when they left parliament. Because quite a number of them moved their center of living from rural or smaller communities to the provincial capitals and especially to Vienna during the time in parliament and stayed there after they left the parliament. Corresponding to that, I want to show you one more table, that is the size of the towns, the centers of living by 1,000 inhabitants. There you can see that between 10 and 16%, increasing over time, of the deputies lived in very small rural communities. Together with those communities up to 3,000 inhabitants, this is about 1/3 of all members of parliament, and this increased over time. At the same time, we have an increase in the numbers of members of parliament who live in the biggest towns, in the biggest cities. That is, cities between 50 and 100,000 inhabitants, 50,000 and 100,000, and over 100,000. At the beginning, at the beginning of the parliamentary time in Austria, these were about 36%, 1/3, and this increased to about 40% at the end. These are two reasons. One of the reasons was that cities grew over this time in Austria. So, especially some provincial capitals moved over these thresholds of 50,000 inhabitants or even 100,000 inhabitants. But the other thing was also that through the professionalization of the politicians, we have at the one side a number of especially functionaries from the agricultural communities who live in small communities and small farm communities. And at the same time, we have an increase in the number of the functionaries of the political mass parties who mostly live in the centers, in the big centers. So we have these two groups that increase, and at the same time, a decrease in the in-between in these middle-sized towns in their representation. At the end, I want to show you or give you some idea about another thing that I haven't put on a slide because I didn't have the data present at the time. That is, a major change that occurred over time was the educational background of the deputies. In 1861 and the following years up to the mid to end 1870s, about 50 to 60% of all representatives had an academic education. That means a degree from a university. And most of them, about 40 to 50%, had a law degree. And we have at the same time only a rather small number, about 10% of deputies, who had only primary education. Towards the end of the parliament, starting with the 1880s, increasing in the 1890s, and then basically exploding after the elections of 1907, we have a reversal in this relationship. In 1907 and 1911, we have more than 30%, about 1/3 of all representatives, who only have primary education, formal primary school education. In the group of the newcomers, of those who were elected to parliament for the first time in 1907 and 1911, this number increases to about 40%. At the same time, the number of university-educated deputies decreases dramatically. In 1907 and 1911, we have less